Hey, it's Brett, and this is They Can't Kill Us All by Wesley, Lowery. We are wrapping up chapter 2 in this video, um, and I'm going back a little bit because at the end of the other one, it was discussing an activist that is still around in the community and still known to be problematic. Shaun King, aka Talcum White or Talcum X. Um, and it's important that there's accountability in the community, um, especially for celebrity activists like Shaun King. So, King partnered with Feminista Jones, a social worker, activist, and feminist writer, to raise more than $60,000 to give to the Rice family soon after Tamir's death. The fundraiser was signed off on by an uncle, but there was a miscommunication, leading some to publicly question whether or not King and Jones had the authorization of the family. Timothy Kucharski had been one of two attorneys representing the Rice family for several weeks when he got a call from a friend in early December asking about an online fundraiser in the Rice name. As the funds raised surpassed $27,000, Kucharski contacted law enforcement, as well as ucaring.com, the site being used to raise the money, asking that the assets donated to the fund be seized and held for the Rice family. He contacted King, who previously used his social media following to raise money for victims of police shootings and natural disasters, and who insisted that his plan was always to give the money to the family. As they went back and forth, a number of Twitter users began insisting that the fundraiser was a scam and demanding it to be halted. It didn't help that King had become one of the most frequent targets of vitriol among political opponents of the protest movement. The backlash was in part his own doing. He had a complicated work history, which included time as a pastor, a motivational speaker, and a fundraiser. His posts on Twitter and Facebook were emotionally and rhetorically charged. He leveraged his presence to drive attention to overlooked cases and to disseminate small but important updates about the best-known police shootings. But King also had a propensity to play a little bit fast and loose with the facts and to fall into profane, aggressive arguments with media personalities, other activists, and political enemies. Here was the darker side of the immediacy and expedience afforded by social media. In the hands of his political enemies, legitimate criticisms about King and others snowballed into a barrage of personal attacks and hate. While many had raised questions, the worst accusations ever substantiated against King related to inaccuracies in his online dispatches and irregularities in the financials of his nonprofit organizations he had previously led. While some argued that he'd stolen money he had raised for the families of victims of police violence, several investigations into those allegations found nothing of substance. When professional attacks didn't silence King, conservative bloggers and writers began to attack him personally, culminating in a sustained week-long effort to prove that King, a biracial man, was in fact white and had been lying about his race for his entire adult life. After a week of constant articles and tweets from conservative websites like Breitbart and Daily Caller, King was forced to publicly acknowledge that he was born as the result of his white mother's decades earlier affair with a black man. The reports about my race, about my past, and about the pain I have endured are all lies. My mother is a senior citizen. I refuse to speak in detail about the nature of my mother's past or her sexual partners, and I am gravely embarrassed to even be saying this now, but I have been told for most of my life that the white man on my birth certificate is not my biological father, and that my actual biological father is a light-skinned black man. King wrote in a piece that he just published on the Daily Kos. Encouraged by me and others, this has been my lived reality for nearly 30 of my 35 years on Earth. I'm not ashamed of it or of who I am. Never that. But I was advised by my pastor nearly 20 years ago that this was not a mess of my doing and it was not my responsibility to fix it. It is horrifying to me that my most personal information, for the most nefarious reasons, has been forced out onto the open, and my private past and pain have been used as jokes and fodder to discredit me and the greater movement for justice in America. Even as the confusion spread over whether or not King's pledge drive for rice was legitimate, the fundraiser for the Rice family presented yet another example of the power of his online fundraising prowess. He and Jones ended up netting almost $60,000, money that, at the request of the Rice family attorneys, was then seized by the courts. The court set up a trustee to manage the funds, placing all the money into Tamir Rice's estate, meaning any withdrawal would require a judge's ruling. Rather than be given the money directly, the Rice family would now have to apply for each disbursement. After attorneys and administrative fees had been paid, more than $20,000 remained in Tamir Rice's estate, and the family had no means of accessing it. After I wrote about this financial drama in May 2015, King announced another fundraiser, this time with the publicly stated support of the Rice family and their attorneys, and raised another $20,000. When I started that fundraiser, it was all under the assumption that this was a good thing for the family. I'd grown to feel like giving money to these families would give them freedom to be their own advocates, King told me later. It still frustrates me to no end that people were saying that I'd taken the money for Eric Garner's and Tamir Rice's families. The controversy, crafted in part due to the media's unique discomfort with activists who cross into journalism, as well as the public's deep skepticism about online fundraising, a realm fraught with frauds and fakes looking to score a quick dollar in the name of those who are suffering. That skepticism was sometimes encouraged by King's own statements and behavior, but it was also, no doubt, further emboldened by the prejudicial thinking that tells us that this bold black man yelling to the crowds must be lying about something. King would ultimately take a job as a columnist for the New York Daily News, where he remains a controversial lightning rod. Detractors continue to raise questions about his past endeavors, and he continues to insist that these are coordinated smears to silence him. He remains one of the most consistent voices in the media writing and talking about police violence against black and brown bodies. At the end of the day, I have a small measure of satisfaction in this sea of ugliness that I've been able to tell families stories from the perspective of an activist, from a perspective that has been compassionate to them, King told me. I've moved the needle even a little bit. It's all been worth it. On December 27, 2015, more than a year after activists had first seen the video of the young boy's death, Prosecutor McGinty's office announced that it was calling a press conference on the Tamir Rice case. I was in D.C., following along via a live stream of the press conference when McGinty came to the podium. "The outcome will not cheer anyone, nor should it," McGinty said. "The death of Tamir Rice was an absolute tragedy, but it was not, by the law that binds us, a crime. If we put ourselves in the victim's shoes, as prosecutors and detectives try to do, it is unlikely that Tamir, whose size made him look much older and who had been warned that his pellet gun might get him into trouble that day, either intended to hand it to the officers or show them it wasn't a real gun. But there was no way for the officers to know that, because they saw the events rapidly unfolding in front of them from a very different perspective." McGinty called the shooting "this perfect storm of human error, mistakes, and miscommunications by all involved." But, he said, he had told the members of the grand jury that he did not believe they should bring charges. When they took their final vote, they agreed. For activists in Cleveland and around the nation, the decision was a bald fist to the gut. Tamir Rice's death had been the most emotional and painful of the police shootings that had gained national attention to date. Whether you faulted the police officer or not, you had to accept that this was the killing of a boy playing with a toy in a park. I don't want my child to have died for nothing, and I refuse to let his legacy or name be ignored, Tamir's mother, Samaria Rice, said in a statement that landed in my inbox that day. As the video shows, Officer Lehman shot my son in less than a second. All I wanted was someone to be held accountable. And now, after making everyone wait for more than a year, the prosecutors were saying that under the letter of the law, Tamir's death was not a crime, and that no one should be prosecuted. It would only be a matter of time before people were taking to the streets in Cleveland. As I started frantically writing and updating our online piece on the announcement, I knew we'd need to hire a freelance reporter in Cleveland to go to the protest and monitor the situation on the ground. As I racked my brain, my editor came up to me. Had I thought of anyone? We really needed someone on the ground in Cleveland. I texted Teddy Cahill, a baseball writer, a former high school classmate of mine, and another of my closest friends in Cleveland. He was home, and I thought he might know of some freelancers with breaking news experience. He didn't, so I made an impulsive decision and gave Teddy's number to my editor. Call this guy, say you got his info from me, and ask if he'll go down to the protest. He's good, he can handle it. As I made my way back to my desk, I sent Teddy another text. Might have just given my editor your contact info. Within the hour, Teddy was headed to the protest, his first news reporting assignment in years, possibly since our high school days when he ran the sports page and I was one of the co-editors. He was nervous, but had cleared it with his editors at Baseball America and started filling his notebook with quotes from the crowd of demonstrators gathering in the park where Tamir Rice had been killed. About 3 dozen demonstrators gathered that night in the park. They joined hands in the rain for About 3 dozen demonstrators gathered that night in the park. They joined hands in the rain for a moment of silence, then began chanting, "No justice, no peace," as they marched across town toward the Justice Center. The decision not to indict was a burden on the family and the community, but at the same time, it's a burden on the police department. Angel Arroyo, an activist with the Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance, told Teddy. The officer who had killed Tamir, Arroyo added, is going to have to live for the rest of his life knowing that a 12-year-old boy lost his life. So it's just pain all the way around for our community. That night came and went with no violence. Teddy spent a few hours snagging quotes before we sent him home. The next day, the piece, written by the two of us and another Post reporter, ran on the front page. We made copies for our mothers. And that's the end of that chapter. And so the chapter addresses Shaun King, who is somebody that I have wanted to bring attention to in the past. This book was written in 2016, and since then, the George Floyd protests occurred, the entire 2020 uprising occurred, and throughout that time, there were a lot of times where he was getting money and not being straightforward. And while this author steadfastly believes that Shaun King is mixed race, to the best of my knowledge, he has since come out and corrected that more transparently, or at any rate, refused offers by a black organization to take a genetic test and substantiate his claims, because the reality is that white people co-opting movements for uh, black liberation and safety and against police violence, which affects us all. But when you are going about it through the perspective of a person impacted by that community, but you're not actually part of that community, you're diluting the message and you're changing the narrative, because now people have to focus on why, after the Israel-Gaza war began, Shaun King converted to Islam, um, because he identified so much with Palestinians. Palestinians aren't all Muslims. Palestinians are Jewish and Christian and Zoroastrian. It's a it's an ethnicity and a region, but it's got many different origins, and it's a rich culture. It's, you know, right at the bedrock of civilization for a long, 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 long time. That land has had people on it, and they've been Palestinians. So Shaun King, instead of, really doing anything to put the focus on actual topic, he has taken the opportunity to center himself. And that is a big downfall of white activism in general, in the US at least, probably in other places. But you have a responsibility, if you're trying to assist your community, to not center yourself and derail everything, and just do weird things for attention. Anyways, chapter 3 is going to be up later. Looks like all these chapters are probably going to be 2 or 3 parts. So subscribe. If you're waiting for more of this to be uploaded, I've got plenty of other books on my channel that I've read. If you want to check those out, I try to make some different voices available that you wouldn't otherwise come across. So hope you enjoy it.